Okay, so let's create the function module. Let's create the function module. What is the prerequisite to create a function module? Function group is a prerequisite. So we created the function group. What is a function group? It holds multiple relevant function modules, right? Any relevant function modules we group together into one function group. So our function group is ready, or you can use any existing function group. But in the projects, you should not assign your function modules to any function group. Whatever the function group you find, don't assign it to that function group because there will be a dependency. Okay. So when you are transporting or when you are changing the function modules, right, it will create the dependencies. It will even create syntax errors. So right, make sure you are using correct function group. Okay, when you are assigning the function group. Let's create a function module. Zdemo add. I'll just create a simple function module. Add numbers. Create. Why I'm creating a new function module? Just to modularize the code. Okay, to execute or to call the same functionality in different applications or different programs. Okay, provide the function group name zdemo underscore gp, right? This is the function group I created. Save. Function module is name is reserved for SAP. Click continue. So this is the function builder. This is the function builder, and this is the first check the attributes. What are the different types of function modules available? Regular, remote enabled or RFC function module, and update function module. Depends on your requirement. You need to select a specific type of the function module. For now, we are creating the regular function module. When we create RFC function module, when we should be able to execute function module in the other system, other SAP system or other SAP server. Okay, in that case we create RFC function modules. When we create update function modules, for database updates, and when whatever the functionality you included in this update function module should be execute only after commit work statement. Okay, the functionality will execute only after the commit work statement. In that case we go for update function modules. So whenever you are trying to update any table within the enhancements, mostly we use update function modules in that case. After every program execution, right, behind a commit work will be executed automatically. A commit work statement will execute automatically to confirm all the database changes. Okay, so even you execute any report program, a commit work statement will execute after the execution of the program. Now I'm selecting regular function module or normal function module, but this is very important interview question. Definitely you'll get question in every other interview. What are the types of function modules and what is the use of each type? Regular can be called only within the same system, and remote enabled can be called in other SAP systems. Update task, to update the database tables, it will execute only after commit work statement. Now go to import. What is the use of import statement, import tab? Here we define the input parameters for the function module. Whatever the inputs you want to pass for the function module, you are going to define here. Inputs are optional. Again, it's not mandatory to have inputs. Okay. Let's define the inputs. What is the functionality of this function module? Add two numbers, right? So define two inputs with two numbers. Please remember, we follow some naming conventions. You can take any name, value 1, value 1, type, type, what is the associated type? Relevant data element or the data type. I am using I, integer. You can also use data element here, or you can use structure here, or you can use a table here in associated type. If you use single data element, it acts as a variable. If you use structure name here, it acts as a work area type. If you use table type, it acts as a internal table type here. Again, I'll explain in detail in the next session. If you want any default values, enter the default values here. Is it a optional parameter or mandatory parameter? If you want to make it as an optional parameter, select optional checkbox. Okay, that means you can pass the value or you can ignore the value. If you select it as optional. Value 1. But in projects, right, we follow some naming standards for input parameter, for importing, exporting. Usually for importing, we use like this, I underscore value 1. You can use any name, but we follow some naming standards for importing parameters. And I underscore value 2, type I. So I've just changed the name, rename. Okay, description. You can also use data elements, structures, tables here, database tables here in the associated type. Now, I've defined two input parameters in import parameter in import. So what is the use of import? To define the input parameters for the function module. What about the export? Export will return the output. Changing, changing acts as both import and export. It can accept the input and return the output. Okay, it can accept the input and return the output. Tables, tables parameter we use to pass the internal table data as input, multiple records as input, internal table data as input, or we return internal table data as output using tables parameter. Okay, we can pass internal table data as input or we can return internal table data as output using tables parameter. What about changing? It acts as both import and export. We can pass some value as input and we can update same value with the new. We can update or we can overwrite the same value with the new value and return the output. Okay. Exceptions. What is the use of exceptions? We use exceptions to raise the errors within the function modules. If there is any error in the function module, how can you notify that to the calling program? Using exceptions. If there is any error in the program, how can you raise the errors? How can you raise the errors in function module? Using exceptions. Using exceptions we raise the error. And source code, we implement the business logic here within the source code as per importing and exporting parameters. Is everyone clear on these parameters? Import accepts only inputs, and importing parameters, we cannot change the value of importing parameters within the function module. Export, return the output. Let me define export parameter, for example, e underscore output, type I. Okay, that is export. What is changing? Changing acts as both import parameter and export parameter. If you define any changing parameter, it acts as both import and export parameter. It can accept a value and update the value and return the same value, return the value. Tables, to pass the internal table data as input or to return the internal table data as output. Exceptions, to raise the errors. Source code, here we write the functionality. Now in source code we have import parameters, two import parameters and one export parameter. Write the logic e underscore output. This is export parameter, right? Equal to I value 1 value 2. Sorry. Check the syntax. We are passing the output to exporting parameter. Check the syntax. Activate the function module. Activate it. The function module is active. So I told you, right, function module can execute independently. Function module can execute independently, can accept the input and return the output independently. That means execute the function module, pass the input and execute, return the output, right, 40. So it can execute independently. So like this we can test the function module to test whether it is working or not. Execute, provide the inputs, okay. Now how we use exceptions? How we use exceptions? Let's say we did not pass, or we are not passing any value for the value 1. Is it possible to calculate the output? If there is no data, if there is no value in the value 1 parameter, if I underscore, first we define the exceptions. Let me define the exceptions first. Go to exceptions, define the exceptions, no input. I'll define one more exception, 0 value. Whenever we got output as 0, we raise this exception. The first exception I'll raise when there is no value provided in the parameter value 1. If I underscore value 1 is initial, then what I am going to do, I don't want to execute further, I want to raise the exception. How to raise the exception? I have the exception no input exception raise using raise keyword, raise no input. So the exception will be raised. What is the other exception? If e underscore output equal to 0, then I'm going to raise 0 value exception. So by using these exceptions we can raise the errors, okay. Execute. Let me enter some value 10, 20. Is it going to raise any exceptions now? No exceptions. Let me remove value for one input, value 1, and execute. Since it is a mandatory parameter, it's expecting some value. I've entered 0 as value. Did we get any output? No, right? It is rising exception, no input exception, it is rising. It is rising a exception in the function module, no input. Let me pass 0 values, both 0 values. Execute. Anyway, the first exception itself, it is rising. It is not going to the second exception, right? So these are the exceptions will be raised. Let me keep a breakpoint and check. Execute. I'm not passing any data in the parameters. So it is initial. Initial means no value. F5. The exception is rising. Okay. Otherwise, I'll jump to the maybe F8. The exception is rising. Is everyone clear how to raise the exceptions? Whenever you need to notify some error or some issue, raise a exception. You can also raise multiple exceptions. You can also create multiple exceptions within the same function module. So you are going to raise individually, each individual exception depends on the requirement. So how we handle exceptions in the calling program? Sorry?
Can you please show the exception tab from?
Yeah. We can define, first we need to define the exceptions, and depends on the requirement you need to raise each exception depends on the condition. Okay, but whenever an exception is raised, it won't execute further, it will terminate the function module execution. Okay, for example, rise if the no input exception is raised at line number 14, it won't execute further, it will terminate the function module execution at the first exception itself. Okay, it won't go to the any other exceptions. How to handle the exceptions? How do you know which exception is raised when you are calling it in the program? For that we use subrc, sy subrc. For example, if you see these exceptions, when you are calling the function module in the program, and after the function module call, if sy subrc equal to 1, what does that mean? Exception 1 is raised. If subrc equal to 2, exception 2 is raised. If subrc equal to 0, no exceptions, no issues in the function module. Okay, so let's call this in the program. I'll create a program. Save it in the local object, and I'll define few parameters, input parameters. Initialization, selection screen, startup selection, end of selection. How to call a function module? So to add these numbers, we'll use one function module, or we'll define one variable for the output. Data lv underscore output type I. How to call the function module? Go to pattern, or Control F6 is the shortcut key. Go to, keep the cursor where you want to call the function module. In start of selection, go to pattern. You can call in any event, even in initialization at selection screen. You can call the function module in any event. Take the function module name, select call function. Function module is called here. Pass the inputs. You can pass hard coded values like this, or you can pass the parameters or variables or work area values, but make sure the type of the parameter value 1 should be compatible with whatever the parameters we are passing in the program. Here if you observe, whatever the importing parameters we defined in the function module are displaying as exporting parameters, right? All the importing parameters we defined in the function module, in the calling program, these are displaying as exporting parameters, and exporting parameter is displaying as importing parameter. Enable this, uncomment all this, uncomment the parameters and exceptions. For this, what you need to pass? Output. In class methods, you can simply define like this using inline declaration, but here in function modules it won't accept. You need to define variable explicitly. The type should be same as whatever the variable you defined here, the type should be same as associated type, whatever the associated type you are using. Both should be compatible, otherwise you will get runtime errors. Now how to handle the exceptions? See, three exceptions are created. No input, zero value, and third one is other exception, one default exception. How to handle the exceptions? If sub RC equal to 0, that means no issue, no error, no exceptions are raised. Otherwise, if sub RC equal to 1, what does that mean? Message, enter, inputs, type E, some error. Else if sy hyphen sub RC equal to 0, what does, sorry, equal to 2, what does that mean? Zero value exception is raised if sub RC equal to 0. How to handle exceptions in the program? Using sub RC value. If sub RC value is 1, first exception, 2, second exception, 3, third exception, right? Okay. There is no exception. That means else if sy hyphen sub RC equal to 0. That means no exceptions, right? No exceptions, and it return the output. LV underscore output. You can also use CLDemo output. Activate the program. There is a typo. Okay. Now activate the program. Let me keep a breakpoint here. The function call. Enter the values. Execute. So we are entering, we have entered value in the program selection screen, not for the function modules. We are passing those parameters to the function module. Two inputs and LV underscore output, it should return the output to this variable. Okay, after function module execution. Now tell me, if I press F5, what will happen? F6, what will happen? If I press F5, it will go inside the function module. Okay, it will go inside the function module. If I press F6, it will complete function module execution in a single step. Let me press F6. Function module execution is completed in a single step. You see, the output is returned to the LV output variable. Is there any exceptions raised? Is there any exceptions raised after the function call? What is sub-RC value? 0, right? Sub-RC is 0, right? That means no exceptions are raised, no issues in the function module call. It will execute sub-RC 0 and display the output. If you press F5, it will go inside the function module and execute line by line. Now I don't want to execute further, I don't want to debug the statements further, I want to return to the main program. Now which key we need to press?
F7.
F7. If you press F8, it will return to the main program and complete the program execution also. But if you want to simply return to the main program, press F7. Okay. For example, I am not passing any value here in the value 1. Execute. Now this is blank, 0. Parameter 1 is 0. F6. What is the sub-RC? What is the sub-RC value? 1. That means first exception is raised. Right? First exception is raised. Okay. Then handle relevant error here. If sub-RC equal to 1, what you want to do? I want to display some error message. Okay. I am displaying some error message. Depends on the exception. Every time we may not be we may not display the error messages, but I am just showing as example. So this function module can be called in any other program, in any number of programs. Okay, this function module can be called in any number of programs or within the other function module also. So function modules are global. So in the next session, I will provide a detailed example using different structures and database, like selecting data from the database tables. Will implement that functionality within the function module. Okay, we modularize the code using function module. Earlier we created few programs, right, using for all entries and joins. So we modularize that for all entries program and joins program using function module. Okay, so here you need to be very careful when you are passing the inputs and returning the output. So both function module parameter and whatever the parameter you are passing in the program should be same type with the same length. Please remember that. Otherwise, it will give runtime errors. Okay. For example, I've defined it as number. This parameter I've defined it as number. But what is the type of this parameter, import parameter in the function module? Double click. Type I, right? Integer. Let me see, is it going to give any error? Okay. Number, I'll use length some 10. Execute. I'll enter some value 20. Execute. Runtime error, short dump. We call this as runtime error or short dump. So check the error analysis. What the error analysis saying? An exception has occurred in class. The function module interface was defined in such a way that only Fields of particular type can be specified under value 1, but p underscore value has a different type. So it is clearly saying I underscore value 1 parameter, we are passing a invalid type, a different type, p underscore value 1. You can even you can see the exact code where it is raising the error. Go to the source code extract, scroll down to the source code extract. You can see these arrow marks, right? So wherever you see the arrow marks, the exception is rising in that specific line. Okay. So usually we access all these runtime errors in ST22. What is the transaction code to access the runtime errors? ST22. Today we have 26 runtime errors in the system. What is your runtime error? This one, right? Which one? This one. Here you can see error analysis, source code extract. What is the what is the code that is causing the issue? If you double click here, it will take you to the program. You can edit and fix the issues. Okay. This arrow marks is used to identify on which line that runtime error is rising. Double click, change the code. Looks like we are already editing this in another session. Go back. Go to the program and change the type. Now execute to return the output. Okay. This is how we call the function module. How to call the function module? Using pattern. The same function module can be called in any other program or any other function module. Okay.